Alright, the other day, the first day we were learning about binomial expansion using Pascal's triangle. This problem, or not this problem, I'm on the wrong page. Hold on. This problem is the one you were supposed to do for homework. So we're going to quickly go over it to make sure you did it right. Alright, the first thing that you have to pay attention to when doing binomial expansion is what? What's the first thing you have to look at? The exponent. This one has an exponent of 7. So we go to Pascal's triangle. And what are the coefficients of this binomial expansion going to be? Very good. Okay, does everybody know how to go to Pascal's triangle and figure out what the coefficients are going to be? Alright, now the next thing you need to do is look at the first term. The first term of this binomial is x. So I will write it first. And since it's first, it gets to be raised to the 7th power. But from there, it descends. X to the 6th, x to the 5th, and so on. All the way down to x to the 0th power. Okay. Then you have to write in the second term, which is y for this problem. But in this one, if x is to the 7th, y has to be to the 0. That way they add up to 7. Okay, when you look at the term, their exponent should add up to 7. So if this one's 6, y has to be to the 1st. And then to the 2nd, to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and then all the way up to y to the 7th. Okay, after that we just simplify, which basically means write what is necessary to write. For instance, do you really have to write the 1 in front of the x to the 7th? Do you really have to write y to the 0? Why not? What is y to the 0? 1. Anything raised to the 0 power equals 1. Remember the other day how I had everybody type in their favorite number and raise it to the 0 and everybody got 1? Anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So there's no need to write it. Then moving on to the second term. I have to write the 7x to the 6th, but when I write y, I don't have to write the first power. It's understood. Then plus, for the next few terms, the next 4 terms, you have to write all of that. Nothing would be understood if you didn't write it. Okay, but then when you get to the 7th term, you put 7x y to the 6th. You don't have to put the 1. And then on the last one, the 8th term, you just put y to the 7th. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but we talked about the other day the fact that you're always going to end up with one more term than the exponent. So the exponent was 7, but we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 terms. That happens every time. So if this had been to the 5th power, our answer would have been how many terms? 6. So on a multiple choice exam, you'll probably be able to knock out some of the wrong answers just by looking at how many terms it has. Like if you're doing something cubed and there's an answer that has 3 terms, you know it's wrong. Because it has to have how many terms? 4. Okay? Alright, so this is what you should have got when you did that for homework. Now today, we're still doing the same thing. All the rules are the same. The only difference is, instead of having 2 variables, we're going to have a variable and a number. Okay, but the rules are the same. So let's get started.
Oh gosh.
Don't worry, it's not hard. Okay, it's cubed. So go to the triangle and tell me what your coefficients are going to be. Okay, so now that we know our coefficients, since it's cubed, we're going to write in our terms. A comes first, and so we'll start it cubed. And then from there it descends. Okay, then our second term is a 4. I put parentheses since it's a number. Okay, so 4 goes in each one of those parentheses. But since it was second, it starts out to the 0 power and then it ascends. Now, the reason it needs to be in parentheses is because think about it. if I just wrote 1a cubed 4, that kind of looks funny, doesn't it? So that's why we use the parentheses around the numbers, because that's, I mean, you might get that confused with like A34 or something, so it's best to put numbers in parentheses. Yes. Okay, so now let's start simplifying. If we're looking at this first term, okay, we're looking at the first term. There's a 1. Now, isn't the 1 touching a cubed, which just means they're being multiplied? Okay, and then it's touching 4 to the 0, which means multiplication. What is 4 to the 0? 1. Okay, get it in your head. Anything to the 0 power equals 1. So 1 times a cubed times 1 is, you're multiplying. What's 1 times 1? And what's 1 times a cubed? Just a cubed. You don't have to write the 1. So now we have simplified the first term. Now moving on to the second term. Okay, 3 times a squared times what? 4, because 4 to the first power is just 4. Now when we multiply all of that together, you get a 12a squared. Okay, then we move to the third term, where we have a 3 times an a to the first, but you don't have to continue writing that first power, times a 16, because 4 squared is 16, and that gives us a 48a. Then we move on to the fourth term, and we have a 1 times a 1, because a to the 0 is 1, times 64. And what is 1 times 1 times 64? Right, so that is the final answer. Step 3 is the final answer. Okay, so the steps all remain the same. It's just you actually have to do a little more simplifying with these numbers. Okay, now let's look at the next problem. Can I move on, or are you still copying? Okay, next problem then. X plus 2 to the 4th power. Since it's to the 4th power, what are our coefficients going to be? Right, 1, 4, 6, 4, 1. Now remember, guys, if you don't want to keep looking back in your packet of the triangle, I gave you that sheet yesterday with a triangle on the back. Okay, if you were here yesterday, you got a sheet with a triangle on the back filled in. If you weren't here yesterday, you can just flip back in your packet and look at it. Okay, so now x is the first term. And since it's first, it gets to start out to the 4th power and then it descends all the way to the 0 power. Okay, and then our number is 2, and it's raised to the 0 power, and then it ascends up to the 4th power. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so now let's simplify term 1. Okay, all of this is term 1. We have a 1 times an x to the 4th times 2 to the 0, which is 2 to the 0 is 1, and then yes, all of that multiplies to just x to the 4th. Just multiplying by 1 does not change it. Okay, you can multiply stuff by 1 all day long and you're not doing anything to it. Kind of like if you add 0 to something, you're not doing anything to it. Okay, now moving to term 2. 4 times x cubed times what? 2. 2 to the first power is 2. That all multiplies to 8x cubed. Okay, then third term. 6 times x squared times 4. And that all multiplies to a right? Okay, then to the 4th term, 4 times x times 8, and that becomes 32x. And then the last term, 1 times 1 times 16. And that all becomes 16. And that's the final answer. Okay, now I want you to take a few minutes, see this practice problem, and then on the very next page, there's another practice problem. I want you to try those two practice problems by yourself. Okay, so the next two problems, the one at the bottom of page 5 and the one at the top of page 6, I'm going to give you a few minutes to try those by yourself. Okay, what did you get for the answer for this one?
Nothing. Wow, that was a great answer.
X cubed. Right, is that what everybody got?
Yep.
Why are there people writing this? You should already have it. You should just be checking it.
Oh, we were caught up in the conversation.
I didn't start it until well after. Okay?
Yeah, but I was done already.
Okay, the next problem. What did you get for the final answer of this one?
So y to the fifth.
What? Y to the 5th.
25 y to the fourth. 50 y cubed.
250 y squared. 3,125
Y.
y.
And then, okay, that's what you should have got for that one if you attempted it, which I can tell some of you did not.
I did.
Guys, copying the answers is not going to help you know how to do it on Tuesday's quiz.
Copying and pasting now.
I see you copy my answer.
Okay, once you've copied that, go to the next page. Go to the next page.
Oh, Mark. Oh,
Next page where it says, let's try negative numbers. Guys, get quiet. Okay. There is no difference here other than the fact that it's a negative number. Everything is the same. It's cubed, so our coefficients are going to be 1, 3, 3, 1. And then the first term is a, so it'll be a cubed, then a squared, a to the first, a to the 0. But now, our second term is a negative 4. And look, inside the parentheses, I already wrote the negative for you. Okay, but the negative 4 over here starts with what power? 0, because each term, the exponents add up to 3 in this case. So this would be a 1, this would be a 2, this would be a 3. Now from there, you're just going to simplify. So looking at term 1, we have a 1 times an a cubed times what? Positive 1. Okay, if you type in negative 4 to the 0 power, it will say positive 1. Now, if you forget those parentheses, it will tell you negative 1. But think about it. If you don't put the parentheses, what is being raised to the 0 power? Just the 4. If you don't put parentheses, only the 4 is being raised to the 0 power. Aren't you supposed to raise negative 4 to the 0 power? That's why the parentheses are so important, to let the calculator know that you're raising the negative and the 4 to the 0 power. Okay? Alright, now, so that becomes what? A cubed. Okay, then we move on to the second term. We have 3 times a squared times negative 4 to the first power, negative 4.
4. Oh, I see.
Okay, so that multiplies to be what? And look, they already wrote the negative 4 right there. Negative 12a squared. Okay, then the third term. We have a 3 times an a to the first, but you don't have to continue writing that first power, times what? Negative 4 squared, positive 16. And that becomes 48a. Okay, and then the last term, we have a 1 times negative 64. So 1 times 1 times negative 64 is negative 64. Okay, let's talk about some patterns here. See how it's positive, negative, positive, negative? It will always alternate like that when you're dealing with negatives. See how this is a minus 4? Anytime you're dealing with a negative number in your binomial, it will always alternate. So in a multiple choice test, that could help you throw out some of the wrong answers. Like, if this were a minus 4 and every single term was negative in the answer, that can't be right. It has to alternate. Now let's talk about why it alternates. if you raise a negative number to an even exponent, okay, if you raise a negative number to an even exponent, it's going to become positive. If you raise a negative number to an odd exponent, it will stay negative. Now let's talk about why that might happen. Like when you have negative 4 to the second power, which is an even exponent, doesn't that literally mean negative 4 times negative 4? So it makes sense that it would become a positive because a negative times a negative is a positive. But when you raise it to an odd exponent like 3, there's a third negative 4. So yeah, those first two negatives might cancel out to positive, but then you multiply by another negative, which changes it back to negative. Does that make sense? And so that's what makes it alternate signs. Because every time there was an even exponent, it became positive. Every time it was odd, it became negative. So that's what makes the answer alternate. Okay, now let's look at the next problem. Can I move on? All right, it's raised to the what power? So our coefficients are? Okay, and then we have x to the fourth, x to the third, x squared, x to the first, x to the 0. And then our second term is that negative 1, so it's raised to the 0, then the first power, squared, cubed, and then to the fourth power. Okay, then we just begin simplifying. We look at the first term. I'm going to underline every bit of the first term. That's a 1 times an x to the fourth times what? Positive 1. Anything to the 0 power is positive 1, even if it was negative. Anything to the 0 power is positive 1. So that all multiplies to what? X to the fourth. Okay, then moving on to the next term. 4 times x cubed times negative 1. Okay, see how that negative number is raised to an odd exponent, so it stayed negative? And that multiplies to be negative 4x cubed. Because you have a 4 times a negative 1, which is negative 4, and then x cubed. Okay, then the third term is 6 times x squared times positive 1. See how it was an even exponent, so it made it positive? And that becomes positive what? 6x squared. And then the fourth term is 4 times x times negative. It's going to be negative because it's an odd exponent. And that becomes negative 4x. And then the last term, the fifth term, because remember we always have one more term than the exponent is, would be 1 times 1 times 1. It'll be positive because it was an even numbered exponent, and that all multiplies to a positive 1. See how, since it was a subtraction, it alternates positive, negative, positive, negative, positive? It'll be like that every time. So that can help you eliminate wrong answers on a multiple choice test. Okay, now I want you to try the next two practice problems. Okay? Yeah, actually try the next two practice problems. Back on. What did y'all get for this answer? Okay. Negative what? Okay, did everybody get that? Check what? Everybody's favorite? I don't know what you mean then. Okay, next problem. What did you get for this answer? Y to the fifth. Shh, guys, be quiet. Okay. Right. Okay, see these on your own problems that are on page 6 and 8? There's 6 total, 3 on page 6, 3 on page 8. That is your homework tonight. Okay? Listen, when you go home and do that, you'll be able to tell if you know what you're doing because they don't give you blanks, they don't give you parentheses. You've got to do all that on your own. Okay? Working those 6 problems will help you prepare for Tuesday's quiz.